practice areas. We'll certainly go into that in more detail with the rest of the panelists as well. But with that, I'll pass things off to introduce the rest of our panelists. Maybe Daniel, we can start with you.
Sure, that sounds great. My name is Daniel. I'm an analyst in the Boston office, and I started right after I graduated, so been here for about a year and a half now. And I primarily work in strategy, policy, and analytics, specifically suspicious order monitoring, but I think that we'll get a little more into that later.
I can go next. My name is Manasvi. I'm a senior analyst in the Los Angeles office. I joined AG 2 years back in 2021. Before that, I received my master's in public health focused in epidemiology. And my undergrad was from India in biomedical engineering. And at AG, I work on health economics and outcomes research, and happy to talk about that in detail as well.
I can go next. I'm Nicole. I'm an analyst in the New York office. I started at AG about just a little bit over a year ago. And in college, I studied economics and international relations. And now in New York, I mostly do a lot of finance, transaction, and governance litigation. And yeah, also happy to talk more about that later in the panel.
And lastly, hi everyone. My name is Tony Hao. I'm an analyst in the Chicago office and also just hit my 1 year mark at AG. So I graduated from Northwestern last year with a master's and bachelor's degree in economics. I was an intern in the Chicago office at AG before my senior year and received a return offer and a return to AG. So being at AG, I had a variety of case exposures like finance cases, antitrust and competition, and ERISA.
Great, thanks everybody. And yeah, so this is a good segue into our first question. This is for our entire panelist group, and we touched on this very briefly, but you know, we all work on a wide variety of different practice areas and different cases. So I was hoping we could go around the panel and just describe, you know, one of the practice areas that you work in, and perhaps one of your favorite projects that you worked in so far in your tenure at AG. So I'll put Nicole on the spot first. Oh, I think I don't think we can hear Nicole.
Yeah, I'm not able to hear you.
I'm gonna ask you, maybe we'll start with you and we'll circle back to Nicole.
Sure. Yeah, I work in health economics and outcomes research, and what that means is most of my projects, we look at what are certain treatment outcomes or certain clinical outcomes of different patient subsets look like. Sometimes we're interested in a certain population with a particular disease, or sometimes we're interested in a subset of patients who've received a certain medication, and we want to know what the outcomes of these patients look like. Almost always over like a period of time, over 3 to 5 year period. I also work on some economic outcome related cases, and in those projects we look at what is the economic burden of these patients, that is, what's their healthcare utilization looks like. And even with that, there are different types of projects. Sometimes we just estimate how much of costs these patients incur in the healthcare system. Sometimes we also do certain modeling like budget impact model and cost effectiveness model. So there's a lot of subtype of work that goes on in HEOR as well. I mostly work on databases like health insurance claims data, electronic medical records, or clinical trial data. So these are extremely large data sets typically that involve a lot of data cleaning, a lot of statistical modeling to draw insights from the data itself. And a favorite project of mine is actually something I'm working on currently, where we're looking at the impact of a particular drug on the population over time. So instead of doing research on a patient level, we're actually looking at the impact of this drug on a population level. So that involves a very different type of aggregating and modeling the data, which is something new. So it's pretty exciting.
Thanks for that. Daniel, I'll put you on the spot next.
Sure, that sounds great. As I mentioned in my brief introduction, I work a lot on strategy kind of work, specifically suspicious order monitoring, or SOM. Essentially what that is a lot of large drug manufacturers and distributors during the Controlled Substances Act were subject to more strict regulations about what the number of controlled substances they were allowed to distribute. And part of the terms that many of them had to reach included them having to get outside companies or outside contractors or consultants, in our case, to actually set limits for how many controlled substances their customers could purchase. So this is a case I've been on since I started at AG. So I've been on the case for about 1.5 years now. And essentially what we do is we have a large algorithm where we receive all of the information about our client's customer ordering history, and we essentially use all of that information to set thresholds that are specific to customer. And a lot of what my role is analyzing these thresholds to make sure that our algorithm is still working based off of different ordering trends. If the client is to get a whole new set of customers, analyzing them and seeing how they fit onto the model, or if they're affecting other customers' thresholds. And I think it's been a really interesting way to kind of learn something about healthcare while also being able to do cool statistical tests and do something that feels like real life work, that feels like there's some real outcome that affects things that we see day to day. And it's an interesting case because it's not ending anytime in the near future. So it's kind of nice to be able to see something from the beginning of my tenure at AG and continue through it and become a leader in that way.
That's great. Thanks, Daniel. And I will kick it over to Tony, and then we'll circle back to Nicole.
Yeah, sure. So next, I can talk about like the broad category of like securities, financial products, and institutions. So there can be like many cases like broadly fall into the category of like finance cases. Personally, I've been involved in like cases related to like securities fraud, short sellings, and also disputes about like municipal bonds and something like that. I think it's super fun to work on finance cases because like I learned about like tons of like different kinds of like financial securities and how they're priced. So besides just like stocks, you also learn about like options, and even certain like bonds have like a put or a call option like feature built into it. And I think that's super interesting when like you start to seeing this kind of stuff appearing in specific cases. And specifically, we use a lot of like finance models and econometric models, and we use these to like pin down like liability and damages. So one of my favorite cases I've been working on is a securities fraud case. There's a securities fraud claim against a public company that was involved in a disreputable event. And so the public company did not disclose its involvement in the event when it happened. And when finally the company's involvement was disclosed by major media, the company's stock price declined. And so the investors were trying to say like, hey, we want to get damages for this because had we know that you were involved in this event back then, we wouldn't want to purchase your stock price. Purchase your stock at a price back then. And so our job specifically was to assist academic expert in analyzing what would be an accurate estimate of the stock price decline that can be attributed to that specific event. Because we know that often like stock prices can be correlated with the market, with industry, and there are a lot of confounding factors. And to do that, we assisted the expert in applying like financial econometric models to estimate the per share impact on the stock price. And we also assist the expert in applying like a trader's model to estimate the volumes that can be impacted in the process. and therefore what could be an accurate estimate of the total damages to the investors, which I think I learned a ton about like finance stuff, and it's super cool.
Thanks, Tony. And Nicole, we'll circle back to you here.
Is this better?
Yep, great.
Great. Yeah, so like I mentioned, I do a lot of finance, transaction, and governance litigation in New York. And I also have done a lot of securities and intellectual property IP cases, which I think we've all touched on a little bit, but I will just fast forward to what my favorite case is. And I think the longest standing one that I've worked on is a valuation case. It's a litigation case about two parties who are disputing a joint venture and what the value of that asset is and what the value of that venture is. And so we've been doing a lot of modeling and a lot of financial modeling and a lot of statistical analysis to help our counsel figure out a reasonable and appropriate and justified valuation range, and then also we also aid in rebutting what the opposing side is putting forth as their valuation range. So I think it's pretty interesting personally, with a bit of a finance background, learning about the litigation side of this and learning about how these models can be disputed and how these models can be justified.
Great, thanks everybody. Yeah, so quite a wide variety of experience across you all, and I think that's fairly true as you think about the firm and in total. And I think that's a great way to shift now. You know, we've talked about these projects that you work on, and what I'd like to talk about for a few minutes here is our staffing model. And I'm sure many people will be interested to figure out how you all get, you know, assigned to these projects. And so, you know, Daniel and Manasvi, I'm gonna focus on YouTube to give both the litigation and the HEOR perspective. So, you know, first and foremost, you know, how does staffing at AG work for you? And in particular, if you can explain a little bit about what we mean when we talk about the internal labor market.
Yeah, I can go first. So in my experience, how it's been, it's when I joined AG, I was staffed on about 2 to 3 projects, just to start out with, for me to get my feet wet and get some real case experience. Moving forward, I've always been approached by either analysts or managers, even VPs sometimes, when they're looking for someone to staff the case with a certain skill set. So when they reach out to me, they would list what type of case it is, maybe what data set they're using, what programming language they're using, and if I have the interest and availability to join the project. At that point, we usually typically ask what the role would be, especially as you start to like grow within the firm. You would like to maybe move to a role where you're leading and training people. So it is possible for us to ask what the specific role would be, how long would the project take, and any other question that we'd like to clarify from the case manager. And if the interests align between you know, me and the case manager, also like the skill sets align as well as the availability, then I would get staffed on the case. So in this aspect, it's always sort of been in my control to pick and choose what type of projects I want to work on. If there's sometimes if there's a particular type of project that I heard from someone else that I've not worked on, I might reach out to them and ask if they're looking for someone, and they could just reach out to me whenever a new project might come up. So in that way, I've been able to sort of steer the type of projects that I want to be on in my 2 years.
Great. And yeah, Daniel, anything else to add there? I know you talked about being kind of on a long-standing project, and I wonder how your experience with the internal labor market has worked for you.
Yeah, it's been very similar. The only thing that I say that I've really focused on since being at AG is like I said, I was started on a very long-term case, and that was my first case when I joined AG. They staffed me on one case, and from there, once I had my feet wet, once I felt like I had some skills and was ready to find something else, I reached out to the manager I had been working with. And I really enjoyed working with him and ended up finding my next case through him. And he connected me with another vice president, a VP that I ended up working with and really enjoying. And from there, all the cases that I found have just been reaching out to managers that I really, really enjoy working with, and seeing when they have availability for cases and staying in close contact with them, which I felt like has worked very well for me. I've been able to not only find cases that are interesting, but also find fellow analysts and also associates and managers who I really enjoy working with and can learn from and can learn skills. And besides that, I think that it has helped me explore different practice areas that I might not have otherwise, just because I'm working with the people that I enjoy working with.
Great. And Daniel, I'll stick with you for a second here, just on the litigation side. You know, between you and maybe some of your peers on the litigation work, typically, you know, what is sort of the number of projects you might be working on at any given time? And then Manasvi, I'll ask you the same thing on the HOR side.
So I am generally only working on 2 cases at a time, but I know that it differs analyst to analyst. I would say the average is somewhere between 2 and 4, but most of the people that I'm in contact with are on between 2 and 3 cases.
Yeah, Manasvi, I'll kick it over to you because I think this is where a distinction might be with HEOR analysts. So curious what your experience has been.
Yeah, we do work on slightly more number of cases at the same time, so it's somewhere between 5 to 8. It could be lower if your case is like quite busy and fast paced, so you might need to devote a large chunk of time towards that project. But most of the HEOR projects span over a longer time, from about say 6 months to 1 year. And sort of the research objectives and the timeline would be laid out in a way that the pace is sort of consistent. So it would be typically like handling at least 5 to 6 cases at once.
Great. And last question on this topic for the both of you, and I guess it's a little bit of a two-parter. You know, one, can you speak to, you know, what level of being a specialist versus a generalist there is in the analyst experience, and also, you know, as you're, you know, then finding what your interests are, how, and you touched on a little bit, but sort of what are those mechanisms that you do to try to either, you know, become a specialist or continue to be a generalist in your eyes?
Yeah, I think analysts typically start out to be generalists, as far as like I've seen in myself and the peers around me, because when you join, you're more curious to know what are the other type of projects out there. And I worked on a wide variety of cases in the first year, and then I slowly started finding things that I like and also things that I don't like. So crossed out a couple of case types from my list and started focusing my interests, and like when I'm reaching out to people asking particularly if they have any the type of case that I'm interested in. And I think that sort of helps build up the leadership skills as well, because when you're a generalist, most often you join projects which you have not worked with before, and you know, it's great to learn how to be a good team player and collaborate with different people when you're a generalist, because the team members and the case managers would be different for each project. But also when you start specializing, that's when you get more opportunities to train newer analysts, and when you're working on, say, a disease area that you're already familiar with, or a statistical methodology that you're familiar with, then you'd be able to share insights from your other case or any literature that you've read before. And I think that is a great path to be on. But that being said, even after you've like chosen a specialization, if you feel like work is getting a bit monotonous and you're finding that you're working on like the same kind of project repeatedly, it is also possible to then branch out and find something else that you'd be interested in, because ultimately all of the skills that we learn are transferable. So once you've like learned, say, one programming language or learned to work with one database really well, it's not going to be very difficult to transfer these skills onto something new.
And Daniel, I'll pose the same question to you, just in terms of your experience.
Yeah, I think that was incredibly well said, and I think that starting out as a generalist is really nice, because it's nice to be able to explore and see all of the things that you can try, and then as you see what you like, I think that's what makes it easier to specialize, or people you like to work with. The only thing I would say I would add is, if work does get monotonous and you're ready to try something out, people at AG are so willing to just chat with you about the type of work that they do. If there's a practice area that you're interested in, but you're not quite sure if you're ready to jump the gun yet, every manager or VP or partner I've spoken to has been more than willing to talk about what the work looks like, and what kind of cases are available. So that's a really great way to kind of get an idea of what something's like, and then maybe decide to try it out.
Great, thanks. And we'll move on to our next topic, and Nicole and Tony have been waiting patiently, so we'll get them in the mix here too. So one of the things I wanted to chat with you guys about is, AG really stresses mentorship and training and our review process as part of our overall support system for the analyst cohort. So Nicole, maybe I'll start with you. In terms of the formal and informal processes and getting feedback and getting guidance and resources, could you talk a little bit more about how these processes have worked for you in practice?
Yeah, so I think in terms of formal processes, there are like yearly and biannual peer review, or not peer review, but like office review cycles, and that's kind of your typical like every job work review, performance review. And I feel like the AG does set it up pretty uniquely and in a way that makes you feel comfortable enough to actually ask for guidance and receive like honest feedback. But we also have, advisors, staffing coordinators, at least in the New York office. I have found those to be really helpful. They are really taking the initiative to set those meetings up with you and to regularly check in with you and make sure that you are doing what you like and that you are not overwhelmed or underwhelmed, just checking in general. I will say there are also like other workshops and a lot of DEI groups that in terms of like formal processes that AG provides, that I found a lot of mentorship in. I'm part of Asians at AG, and they have been making a lot of efforts to bring people across offices together so that we can all understand like what our experiences are within the firm. So I found that pretty unique and impressive. And then in terms of informal, I would say there are peer mentors, other analysts. Those have also been very, very helpful, especially when I first started. I think that was one of like my key resources was my colleagues and other analysts and senior analysts. I think the New York office is quite a tight-knit group, and so that's been a real blessing for me. And then lastly, in terms of guidance, I will say something that as an ex-international student, I think AG's legal team has been really, really outstanding at providing guidance and advice on, navigating all of that stuff, which you'll have to do if you're an international student post-grad. I think that really did stand out like AG does really stand out among other companies in that regard.
That's great. Thanks, Nicole. And Daniel, I know we previously chatted a little bit just about, there's a lot of formal structures, but there's, I think informal mentorship too is sort of steeped in our culture. And I was wondering if you could, speak a little bit on your experience on, any kind of peer relationship that's been meaningful to you.
Yeah, definitely. I would say, like you said, there's a lot of opportunities for these informal moments of connection in and out of casework. And I think one relationship that I forged relatively quickly that ended up helping me a lot was one that I made at our annual Black at AG Summit. I attended before I actually started at AG. And I ended up running into someone who also worked in the Boston office. She told me that she was on the 18th floor and she was telling me about all of the cases that she was working on. And like she immediately offered to meet outside of the summit and get coffee and talk about her experiences. It ended up turning out that she was on my first case that I ended up talking about. And that's what she had been explaining, which was really cool. And since then, we've been able to stay in contact. She's helped me tremendously with things like writing my yearly summary, like Nicole was talking about, and just navigating my relationship with my advisor even, and like how her experiences were. Things that are just like really useful to learn from people who are in your shoes very, very recently. And that's just one example. I think that AG is a great place to be able to talk to other analysts and see what they're doing, whether they be the same tenure as you or older than you or younger than you. Everyone has different experiences and can share them. And that can help you navigate any question that you might have.
Great, that's great. And Manasvi, is there? I think there may be a time in your experience where that role of mentorship maybe fell sort of outside of your just typical work responsibilities as well. I was wondering if you could speak to that.
Yeah, I joined in 2021 where we weren't really like back to work. People weren't really coming into the office as much. There was still a lot of like an ambiguity about this work from home and how it works and things like that. So my mentor really helped me acclimatize into like the office, helped me navigate sort of getting onboarded in the remote work setting, which could be quite difficult. And beyond that, I've had a lot of conversations with other people than my mentor about their experiences with PhD, for me to think if that's sort of like a path I'm interested in. I do know a lot of my peers who've been able to work with certain managers for a long period of time. These could be their direct mentors or their advisors or just like case managers they worked with that have been able to guide them through like the grad school application process, help them review like their SOP, write some letters of recommendations for them, also guide them through which schools are great for which sort of course, and help them think about the next step, which I think is great because that's just people at AG going above and beyond for their colleagues.
Thank you. And yeah, Nicole and Manasvi she mentioned very briefly graduate school and the support that AG gives regarding folks' ambitions to go to grad school afterwards. So and I'll do a shameless plug just to say that the graduate school workshops are great. It's something that I benefited from and continue to help with when I came back as an associate, and it's a fantastic program. And so Nicole, I was just curious if you had any thoughts about that as you were considering AG as an option, and what type of those resources attracted you.
Yeah, definitely. I think when I first started learning about AG and recruiting, I had several conversations with analysts and people at the firm, and something that I've heard consistently, even now having joined, is that, like you said, Dylan, the workshops are pretty unique. And I think that they're really, I've heard overall, they've just been very, very helpful. And they do really take the time to give you advice and to pair you with someone that fits the goals that you want to achieve in grad school. And I think that's something I've been starting to think about after a year in, and those are the conversations that I'm starting to have. And I feel like, again, it's like formally there are these workshops and there are these conversations that you can have, but also informally, I think, again, like my peer mentors and like other analysts and even associates that I'm work with a lot and are close to, I think the culture is generally very, very open to having those conversations and to helping you out and giving like honest opinions about what their experiences were and what you should do and maybe what you shouldn't do. And so I think having that, and also the fact that AG is a firm where a lot of people do end up going to grad school, sometime sooner or later. So I think being in that environment keeps you kind of on track. Like it's easy to maybe lose track of that goal. What if I had started at a firm that like maybe not everyone typically, or a lot of people typically go to grad school. So I think that's focus has been, or that motivation and that focus has been really nice for me.
That's great. And Tony, last but certainly not least, just to close out our discussion on mentorship and training, I was just curious as you reflect on your experience so far, has there been any proud moments that you've had in relation to the mentorship and support process that AG offers?
Oh yeah, of course. I can talk about, so I've been like one of the R training mentors in the Chicago office. And like since this summer, I have like quite a few moments where like some colleagues or like interns are having certain like R programming related issues, and they weren't sure like if they're currently doing it correctly or like sufficiently like efficient to deal with certain situations. That will come ask me to see if I can help. And sometimes after discussing certain approaches, like how to best approach the data, they will be able to like shorten the time they actually need to run the code like many times fold. Like they previously might be thinking that they need at least 30 minutes to run certain code, but then the time span can be reduced to as much as 5 minutes. And so I think during these moments, I feel like, as one of the person who can like provide the support to the people, I feel like very happy because that's what my peer mentor was doing. Like for me, when I just joined, I wasn't sure how to use certain like statistical programming languages to deal with things efficiently. And whenever I knock on his door, he always just come out and help me with the stuff. And that helped me greatly. And I'm very happy that I'll be able to pass on this kind of experiences to other people. And generally, I feel like AG people, like analysts, associates, people of all levels are very willing to pass on the knowledge they have to other people just to make things awesome.
That's great. And Tony, we're gonna keep you on the hot seat for a couple more minutes here to talk about the summer internship experience. So, we may have folks on the line who, maybe are, rising, into not quite seniors yet and not quite thinking full time, but maybe thinking about internships. And so, first and foremost, could you just tell us a little bit about your internship experience? What were the cases you worked on, and just that process of going through that training and 10 week span?
Oh yeah, of course. So I actually did my internship back then in 2021, which was like the COVID period. So the online experience might be, like slightly different compared to the actual in-person experience, but it's more or less structured like in a similar way. So as an intern, I joined like an actual case that is like I'm working on. And it was a finance case, but the role that I worked on in that case was specifically related to find like similar like merger and acquisition case studies that we can use for reference for the case. So even though it's like an actual case and that there's a lot of serious things involved, even as an intern, I was entrusted to do this research task independently, and I find it like very, very empowering. And another like highlight of my internship experience, which is still ongoing in Chicago office, is the mock case we have for the interns. So specifically, me and a few of my intern class, we completed like a full like mock case study that was adapted from like a real case. We started from the very initial stage of just reviewing the case documents and the initial plaintiff claims, and to the very end stage, which is like calculating what we think should be like an accurate estimation of the damages incurred in the event. And during the full stage, there are like associates, analysts, like people of all levels providing advice and like guidance on us. But still, as an intern class, we feel like we have a lot of kind of power and freedom to determine what kind of directions of analysis or like research want to take on and how to come to these numbers, which we also think is like very engaging and very like enjoyable. And this year, what is even more fun that the Chicago office does is that we have a number of interns. We split them into two teams. So we have people like representing the plaintiff side, we have people representing the defendant side. And they will try to see that for the same case, what would be the best arguments that can come up from the side they're representing. And when they come up with their analysis, they will cross-examine each other's arguments and try to rebut each other's arguments and see what assumptions make most sense, what assumptions may not stand, which is really like even more interactive and making people understand, the interns understand, like what would be kind of the stages for an actual case that we'll go through, which I think is really one of the highlights of the AG internship, and especially in the Chicago office. And then in terms of the trainings, so I went through a lot of like technical trainings like Excel, R, Stata, the kind of things. There are also a lot of like trainings on the soft side, for example, like how to best communicate with people in a team, what would be the best way to, for example, like discuss your situation, like whenever you have like a case conflict, you know, how to best discuss with managers on both cases and sort things out. I think that's also like a really good boost to me in terms of like soft skills, communication skills, and things like that. And then I become really good friends with my intern peers, also like my peer mentors when I was an intern. And there were like a ton of social activities that happened back then, even though it was like online. We did like scavenger hunt themed like happy hours, which is super fun. And then now like when the internship is fully in person, and it's also like super fun. Like we did like patio, like social on like a very nice restaurant. We went to like bars and did like darts shooting. We also went on like bowling and karaoke after like certain event. So all this like mingling make like the interns become like super like connected to all the current analysts and associates and all the people in the firm. And we like totally enjoy the process.
So, so obviously you came back for full time, and so you know, it sounded like you had a great experience. Or were there maybe one or two things that, you know, ultimately tipped the scales for you to decide to come back after your internship?
Oh yeah, of course. So I think I really like, especially I think while I did hear people talk about it, you know, when I was at the other side, like hearing people talk about it during the info sessions, I think when the actual intern, I genuinely feel like I really like the flat team structure here. Like the managers will like listen a lot to what the analysts say about, you know, analysis and like what the analysts would propose about like, here's a new sensitivity or here's like a new direction that we should gear the analysis towards to. I feel like the flat team structure is like really empowering, and also like how like it's a very like collaborative instead of competitive environment here at AG, whereas like people really like collaborate to get things done instead of like trying to be like I'm better than you, that kind of mentality. And I also genuinely like the pace of work here is that I feel like I had a lot of time that I can just sit down, think through analysis, discuss analysis with people in my team, and instead of like rushing to get a number. And also like really how like I can like what Daniel and Mansavi has discussed a lot about like the very cool internal labor market that I can, you know, explore my interests through like deciding which cases I want to engage through. And lastly, I will add that I think I'm a person who's very interested in like rigorous analysis. I think at AG, what is very different from school is that we actually like apply a lot of rigorous analysis to very specific industrial like contexts. And that is something I didn't learn back in school. And I think at AG, I learned a ton about these. And I think these are really, really like enriching skills. I get to learn what are the kind of questions I need to ask to get the right answers in order to proceed to get the actual really valuable information for the analysis. Like I've been working on like pharmaceutical drug supply related cases and like a case related to like train tracks. Those are industries I never tapped before, but I feel I learned so much about these industries. I've been working on them. So I think that's very, very enriching experiences. I would love to keep on working these type of cases at AG.
Awesome, that's great. So switching gears a little bit now, there's, you know, I think not too long ago, you know, you were sitting in the shoes or, you know, same seats or filling the same shoes as those on the call right now in terms of, you know, thinking about what does post-graduation look like and what careers out of the many options that you could possibly pursue. So, you know, Daniel and Nicole, maybe we'll start with Daniel first. What was your experience as a student that led you to pursue economic consulting?
Yeah, so I don't know if I mentioned this in my introduction, but I studied economics and psychology at Williams. And I really enjoyed my econ classes, but not necessarily for like the theoretical work I was doing. I thought it was really cool to like be able to use tools that I was learning in that and then ultimately apply them to real life scenarios. And so I had done a research internship where I conducted an independent research project in economics. And I thought it was interesting, but I was still kind of looking for something that was a little bit more geared towards real life work that's going on. And I think that that's something that I was really interested in finding. And I think that as I started to look for jobs, I stumbled across AG, and that seemed to be all of the combination of the things I was looking for. So really looking for something where I could be curious and think and come up with solutions to different questions while also knowing that my work would be applied directly to something that I could see a tangible outcome for. And I think that one big part of this is like those tools don't necessarily have to be things that I learned in an econ class. But I think that just being able to utilize different things that I learned across college, whether it be in econ or psych, have been great. And I've been able to think critically, and I've been able to come up with my own ideas, and it led me directly to AG.
And Nicole, how about you?
Yeah, as a student, I think my background was, econ and IR again, and I did my junior internship in banking, and I thought that finance, I mean, it is still an interest of mine, but I thought that that was all I really wanted to do. And then having done the internship, I realized that I do like a little bit more of the academia side, although the business side was still pretty interesting. So I kind of stumbled into it. I talked to my advisor, and she suggested this thing called economic consulting, looked into it, and talked to more people, which I think is really important, having conversations with people who are in the industry and, who are of my age range, and learning from them. And I realized that, like this job could provide me with a really wide range of, it would fulfill a lot of the interests that I had in school and in business and in my professional career. Like, for example, I feel like I get the finance stuff in certain cases, and I get to learn about that. But then I'm also currently doing an academic research case on false political advertising, which is very much leaning into that IR side of my interests. And then, I think after also talking to some people, I realized that strategically, like, there are a lot more opportunities after economic consulting as an analyst. I think you can go into law, which a lot of people I've heard do. You can go to business school, you could go to grad school and continue into your academia. So whereas I felt like in finance or in banking, I felt a little pigeonholed, and I didn't want to be narrowed down too early in my professional career. So that's why I ultimately felt like it was a better fit. But I think having started the job, I also realized that everyone around me like has a very different background. Like, no one has, like, I have my closest coworker, she worked at the Fed for a summer. She is like very into behavioral economics. She's planning to go to get her PhD. So I really think that there are no like hard specific requirements. There's no cap on what experience you need to have. I think if anything, we're looking for people who have more so the skill and ability to think through a problem. I think that's much more important at the crux of the job, rather than like what your background and credentials necessarily were in college. And I think teamwork skills are very important as well in this job. You're always working with different people, with different clients. And so I think that those are the skills that I've learned the most from. And I think that's kind of what led me to pursue economic consulting. And ultimately, like, I don't regret it. I think I made the right choice.
Awesome, great. And Manasvin and Tony, do you, each of you, do you have any, one piece of advice that you would give to someone who's a student now, who's just thinking about their career path in general? And Manasvin, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think when I was thinking through what roles to apply, I was already interested in sort of public health and healthcare, but there are different, avenues to go to. You have the industry of consulting, you have pharmaceutical companies, and you have like academia. I think what helped me at that point was what would excite me. If hardcore research, that's like joining a research team and like taking that deep dive into one topic, um, would be of interest, then you can sort of focus sort of your efforts of applying for jobs towards academia or other research organizations. And what drew me to consulting was sort of the balance of both. What we do with our clients are sort of like research projects, like we are given certain defined research objectives, and we do a lot of these analysis to answer them. We also do a lot of publications in journals, and we disseminate our findings in manuscripts. So it is a lot of research, but at the same time, it's also fast paced. Like each project would be 6 months to 1 year, so I'm not committing myself to one area that I am not yet confident that that would be the area that would interest me for like my entire career. So I think consulting is a great space for you to explore. At the same time, each project that I work in has like a different statistical methodology, or like a different disease area, and I don't have to necessarily pick one and like have to live with it for a couple of years. So I think that really attracted me to consulting, and also just working with like the industry leaders, the managers and VPs that I work with. Most of them have PhDs in epidemiology and biostatistics. The clients are also leaders at their field. So the conversations that we have with them are all about, like Tony mentioned, rigorous scientific analysis. And oftentimes these are we help them to publish, we help them to bring a certain drug to the market. So this is sort of like the forefront of the industry as well. So which is like a great place to be and learn, especially in the first job.
Great. And Tony, I'll ask you the same if you got any parting words of wisdom.
Yeah, I think Nasby and Nicole has put it very well. I would just add that back then when I was thinking about career path, I feel like I'm interested in like applying rigorous analysis to like a lot of, whatever, it's like a new field, a new industry, like a new industry or like new context that has a feature that interests me, but then I'm not necessarily knowing that, okay, this is certainly the path I want to go in the long run. So I feel like at AG, I feel like I decided to land with AG is because it is giving me like an environment I can really like Nicole said, like have interactions with people with a very wide variety of like background, and also like just talk through it with people with different, like backgrounds, with different kind of ideas where they want to go, be it like law school, business school, finance, tech, data science. And also that the work done here at AG gives me and also other people a lot of varieties just to tap into different kind of work that like people get interested in. For example, like data work, financial modeling, or like more like stuff more related to like legal arguments. So I feel like after like really kind of have like in-person experiences of all these things, I feel like I gain a better understanding of like maybe later, this is the field I want to tap into. And I feel like this kind of like having this kind of platform for exploring like your interests is like very valuable. And I think that's why I feel like AG is a very good place for people's like first job.
All right, great. And so in our last couple minutes here, I think one of the things that we wanted to end on was, just thinking about, the office cultures, and we've got Boston and New York, Chicago, LA represented here. So we'll go around, clockwise, at least on my screen here. Do you have any favorite AG memory from a social events, or anything that your specific office has put on for a team building exercise, or or fun office outing, that was unique and that you really enjoyed. So, Manasvi, I'll start with you. If you have any nice memory to share.
Yeah, the LA office, we pride ourselves in throwing some of the best parties, or I don't know, I've not attended the others, but our admins love to say that they throw the best parties. So we have a lot of office events around the year, especially when the interns and like the new cohort joins, we have like a lot more of activities going on. So people can like get to sort of meet everyone. My favorite event was actually a healthcare team building event earlier this year, which was like a pottery class. So we all went to this place where we could build like our own vase. And that was really cool. And we spent like 2 hours there, just like getting our hands dirty with the clay and just getting our creative juices flowing. And it was nice to be doing that with like all of the managers as well, because we were all like, we were all in a mind space where we were absolutely not thinking of work. We were just like being like kids in school in like a arts and crafts class. So it was super fun, and definitely it was a great team building event.
Great. And Nicole, I'll point in your direction next.
Well, I'm actually on the events committee in New York, or at least the analyst events committee, and so I definitely have a lot of favorite social events. I think obviously being in New York has helped with planning stuff and having a variety of things to do. But actually, I'm sure that's the same with all offices that are like in cities and stuff. I think AG is really, really nice about promoting that culture and promoting in office culture. So the budget for our events is pretty generous in my opinion. And so I think some of my favorite events include like, we've done everything from happy hour rooftops to like pasta making classes. We've done mini golf. We are doing small trips. We're actually going to go to Montauk in a couple weeks with the whole office. So I think, there's a lot of fun events going on to promote that office culture. And in terms of admin as well, like every Tuesday, Wednesday, and although I know that the New York office isn't as like in terms of free food, I think the other offices beat us here, but we do have like Thursday happy hours and formal Friday happy hours that I think, in general, like the office knows each other pretty well, and so we do get together pretty often. I don't really have a favorite. I guess if I had a favorite, it'd be the pasta making class. That was really good.
Great. And Tony, how about you in Chicago?
Yeah, Chicago has a bunch of like fun stuff as well. So what we just did last week was we had like a field day. Basically, everybody in the Chicago office would went on a field and play like sports games like dodgeball, volleyball, and did fun relay races where like we had like really enjoyable like Friday afternoon and evening. And just like a month before I started, I'm still feeling, so that was actually a month before I started, like the whole office went to a Lady Gaga concert in Chicago, which it's amazing. I would probably consider starting 1 month earlier, had I known that like earlier. And also that this year, the whole office went for like a weekend trip to Color. And basically we all went to this very nice old style hotel. We stayed there, enjoyed the spa, enjoyed the sports games there. It was like very like fun, nice and relaxing weekend with the whole office spent together.
Awesome. That sounds good. Yeah, I'm sorry you missed the concert, but hopefully we'll get a good one next time around. And then Daniel, I'll close out with you to represent us here in Boston. What's been your favorite thing so far that we've done?
Yeah, so I think I'll start with one, as everyone's mentioned, like there's a ton of like formal events that are really, really fun. But one thing I actually really, really like is informal happy hours that are hosted by analysts. So once a week on Friday, a group of analysts will get together, like maybe they're sitting at lunch together, and they'll send a message to the entire, like all of the analysts, and send something funny and say everyone should meet at this bar at 5:30, which I really like. It is always a fun way to close out the week. I think my favorite activity or event has been our ski trip that we took in February. We went to Mount Omni, Bretton Woods, and people could ski, people could do spa. I'm horrible at skiing, like awful. But I signed up to ski. I was like, I'm with my friends. The day ended with me sliding down the mountain with two analysts carrying my skis with them. But it was a great bonding experience. I felt like I met a lot of people on my way down. And all in all, it was just a great weekend and a great way to get to have some fun with all of the analysts and people higher up being able to enjoy themselves. And it's great to be able to do things like that with the whole firm.
Great, that's great. I will also agree. The ski trip is a fantastic experience. That maybe I'll do the same and opt for the spa the next time around to avoid any injury. But other than that, yeah. So great events all around. So that I think covers it in terms of our questions for the panel this evening. I wanted to first thank you everybody on this panel. Thanks to everybody who was on the call. And Lily, I don't know if you have any parting words that you wanted to give the group here who's joined us, and I know maybe put up that QR code again, but I'll kick it back over to you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dylan. Much appreciated. And to mirror and echo, excuse me, what Dylan has just mentioned, thank you so much to all of you on the call, to all of our amazing panelists. I wanted to share the QR code with you once more, just so that you have it. I also wanted to call out some important deadlines that we have coming up on here as well. We have one of our full-time application deadlines coming up on the 17th, and then a second one coming up on the 1st of October. And then additionally, our summer analyst application deadline on October 15th. We do have one last session of our fall engagement series taking place tomorrow evening, which is our office culture and collaboration. So that should be a great event, and we're looking forward to seeing most of you on the call there as well. But with that, I will let everyone go. Have a nice rest of your evening, and thank you so much all again for joining.